Hello everyone, and welcome back to another instalment of our long-running webinar series. Since we started our webinars in 2017, hundreds of experts have shared their knowledge on many different sustainability topics. Hearing from our experts and experienced guest speakers is a great way to build your sustainability knowledge and help your business succeed sustainably. Are you looking for inspiration to advance your sustainability program in 2024? Want to have more impact with your limited time and budget? Searching for ideas to help you wrangle your data and influence your decision makers? Join our Impact Director Nicole Sullivan and Services Director Emily Townsend for our first webinar of the year. Let's get into it.
So the very best place to start with tip 1. We find that successful sustainability programs really make the most of connections, and that's between projects or initiatives and also between stakeholders. So that means building on existing data and relationships and know-how to connect the strands of your sustainability program. So we have a couple of examples that we can talk through. First one, we've been partnering with Convita for several years now. From the start, they wanted to ensure that they set themselves up for success and that they really thought about how to connect their different initiatives. So a maturity assessment helped them to understand where they were and where they wanted to be, while a materiality assessment ensured that they understood the priorities of all of their stakeholders. Climate change is one of their really big focus areas, and they'd been reporting emissions for selected operations for several years already. We started working with them on that in 2021 and supported them to extend their reporting to cover first all of their New Zealand operations and then wider into their global operations and covering all of their scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. And that helped them to understand how much their emissions are in their supply chain and their value chain, and to also focus on working with their suppliers on how to start tackling those. At the same time, we also undertook a life cycle analysis study for Convita's honey, which helped to understand the impacts across its life cycle. So that fed into their corporate footprint as well, informing the likely impact of their honey supply chain, where they buy out from their partners, and also with detail in their downstream distribution chains. So the two fed into each other. And also overlapped with their focus on packaging, which was all about understanding the circularity of their different packaging options across their end users in all of their different markets, and identifying opportunities where they could improve. So again, that fed into the LCA and into the greenhouse gas inventory and improved the robustness of the data and relationships across all of those projects. And then more recently, Convita have become a B Corp, and they've been able to use the initiatives that they've worked on so far as evidence to meet some of the requirements, as well as that they've helped them to deepen their relationships across their value chain. So you can really see there's a whole load of interconnecting parts to help them make the most of it.
Thanks, Emily. I'm just going to have a quick talk about InfraBuild. So we started partnering with InfraBuild about a decade ago. So we started off working through lifecycle assessment with them, and they were one of the early publishers of EPDs in Australasia, publishing 5 EPDs on their steel products. As part of those EPDs, they also looked into the circular economy and particularly measuring the circularity of the steel that they were producing, and they used the Material Circularity Indicator, or MCI, and that's published in their EPDs. On the basis of all of that work, we've also done quite a bit of decarbonisation scenario analysis with them. So you may have heard InfraBuild have some pretty big decarbonisation ambitions with adopting renewable energy very soon. And so we've worked with them to support their analysis of what that means in terms of their greenhouse gas footprint. And then probably a more recent evolution for InfraBuild is then also using materiality assessment with us. So materiality assessment is looking at what impacts are material or relevant for your business, but reaching out to stakeholders, both internal and external, to understand their views rather than just reinforcing what you already knew. So they actually used that to understand and to highlight what was important to them, and particularly what came out is a real focus on people for InfraBuild as well as the environment. Our partnership with InfraBuild delivers value because we know their business and their sector. Actually look out for a special case study that will be coming out soon, which is going to outline the long-term business impact of connecting and building on your sustainability work, all based on InfraBuild's work. At thinkstep, we talk about succeeding sustainably. Succeeding sustainably isn't just a neat tagline that we use. It's also our vision and our motivation for our clients as we partner with InfraBuild, Comvita and more to succeed sustainably.
Which brings us beautifully onto our second tip, which is to set your sights high and to commit publicly, whether it's for your sustainability or for your own personal goals. We all know that sharing your aims and targets with people who will hold you to account helps to make sure that you will achieve them. So commit and create a plan or a roadmap with steps to how you're going to get there, and that challenge you to keep doing more and to building on your success. And also with this, think about looking beyond your company. So how can you make change more quickly by maybe working across your sector? So again, we have a couple of examples for you. We work with Spark to help them assess their corporate greenhouse gas inventory as the basis for setting a verified science-based target. So that commitment from Spark, again, was to significant decarbonisation and is public and out there for people to assess and see how they're doing. Our original plan was then to work with them on a decarbonisation plan to reach that target, but they realised that they knew enough to do that in-house and they wanted to aim higher. So together we worked on a public report about the role that digital technologies can play in reducing carbon emissions. And that looked beyond what Spark could do or what Spark's work could enable, and actually looked at how the sector as a whole could help New Zealand to decarbonise and to meet our global commitments. So it's a really significant piece of work. It caught the interest of the New Zealand government, which was quite exciting. And as a result of that, there's work now underway to ensure that the role of the high-tech sector is integrated into future emissions reduction plans within New Zealand. So again, it's about setting that ambition high.
Across in Australia, well, really, Trans-Tasman, we believe in the power of industry associations to multiply the positive impacts of industry. And we've worked with the Australian Steel Institute to develop a program called Steel Sustainability Australia. It's a whole of industry certification program that addresses holistic sustainability issues. It was built based on the Green Building Council of Australia's Responsible Products Guidelines. Now, this program starts from a beginner entrance level to help companies get started. Particularly, we're talking about small to medium enterprises who are really trying to address particularly environmental impacts as well as social impacts. But Steel Sustainability Australia uses a 3-tier system of certification because what they want to do is support the ambition of their most advanced members too, by pushing and supporting them as far as they can go. Our third tip is to communicate. David Attenborough famously said that saving our planet is now a communications challenge. Well, what we work to do is turn technical reports, which, sorry, Emily, sometimes they can be a bit dull and dry, but we actually want to turn them into action because we, our planet and our communities need clear, engaging communications. We want to influence decision makers so they can understand and act on our technical findings. And we want to enlist support and progress from stakeholders like suppliers. So rather than just dry, dull and boring technical reports, what we're working on are clear and credible communications to help you build your brand and comply with regulations like climate disclosures. But when we're talking about communicating and sustainability, we need to be aware of greenwash. So that's making a message more positive than it might be in reality. But also green hush. Have you heard of that one? Green hush is underreporting or hiding to evade scrutiny. And we don't do either. So some examples. We helped AA Insurance to develop and publish their sustainability report last year. We also drafted climate disclosures for them in 2023 to prepare for publishing mandatory disclosures in 2024. To some organisations, transparency disclosures can feel like a risk, but we work with our clients to help them understand what is needed and prepare them for what's coming. And AA Insurance are a great example of being prepared.
Thanks, Nicole. So similarly, we recently helped Zip Water to develop their first sustainability report, which is following the Global Reporting Initiative framework. So this focuses on the topics that matter most to their stakeholders and their business, again, following a materiality assessment. And it covers both their achievements and also the areas that they're working to improve. And it's really important that you cover both. We've also worked with ZIT previously to create and then to update an environmental product declaration for their hydro tap, again, demonstrating their commitment to transparency and to improving the availability of data to support decision making for their customers. And then you may have seen this just before the webinar started. It was one of the examples up on the screen. So the nutshell report for king salmon farmed in New Zealand is a really great example of what Nicole was saying about communicating complex technical information in a digestible and easy to understand way. So the nutshell focuses on using plain English and with infographics to get important information across to the reader. So sitting behind this is a critically reviewed study that focused on the life cycle impacts of the protein content of the salmon and also compared it to other forms of protein. That is one of those long, complex and somewhat dry reports. And it is available for those who want to read it, but it's been summarized down to 5 really information packs and easy to understand pages in this nutshell. So it's a great example of how you can bring that complex information out to your readers. And that brings us on to tip 4, and revisiting. So your decisions and your actions are only as good as your data. And that's why it's important that you revisit them regularly. There is no point in setting a target to reduce your carbon emissions if you don't know where you're starting from and how much you need to reduce by. So lots of things can change, whether it's emission factors, your own operations and the way that you do things, your supply chain, your value chain, or just what your stakeholders expect of you and where they want your focus to be. So updating your data and your assumptions to match helps you to keep up to date with that. Again, we have a few examples for you. You're probably getting the trend now. So Z Energy have been measuring and reporting their emissions annually for quite some time, and their reporting is already covered by reasonable assurance. So clearly, they know what they are doing. But measuring emissions is complex, and your work's never really done. There's always things that are changing, and there's improvements that you can make. So we worked with Z Energy quite recently to help them update their baseline, reflecting a change of reporting period. So they moved from a calendar year to a financial year. And then also where they'd made divestments, which removed some emissions from scope 1 and moved them into scope 3, and just generally changes and updates to how their business was currently operating. As part of that, we checked if there was anything unexpected happening, like new emission sources that might change the composition of their overall footprint. It wasn't the case for Z Energy. Things didn't change too dramatically, but it can happen, especially as you start to measure a new category, something you've previously ignored, or as you start reporting more accurate data, or even as you start decreasing some of your big emission sources in one area, other sources become more important because they're relative important increases. So really important to keep revisiting, making sure that your assumptions are right.
Absolutely. And really, as thinkstep-anz said, we have to walk the talk ourselves. When we tell our clients to focus their effort on where it matters, we need to do that too. So before we released our thinkstep-anz integrated report in 2022, we updated our materiality assessment. Yeah, sure, we had done one before, but how would we know if our most material issues were still the same if we didn't ask? So we went back to our stakeholders and we asked again. Now, it turned out for us that they hadn't changed, and it reinforced the direction we were taking. But for many of our clients who operate in evolving markets, they can change quite a bit. So don't forget to revisit them and ensure that you do get an independent view.
And then with a slightly different example, David Trowbridge published the first EPD in Australasia all the way back in 2015 that covered their kit set pendant light fittings. They've always been really keen on transparency and making sure that they share their data. As well as making that data available, the study really helped them to understand where their hotspots were and to identify opportunities to improve. So when it came time to update their EPD 5 years later, at the end of its validity, the update reflected not only changes to their product range, where they'd introduced some and removed others and changed paints, but also the impacts from the improvements that they'd implemented as a result of the original study. So they were able to show not only maybe changing situations elsewhere, but also the impact that you're having as you make improvements.
Okay, we're up to our last tip. Now, don't forget, I can see a couple of questions might have popped in there, but don't forget to add your questions because we're approaching question time very soon. Now, our last tip, tip 5, is that people matter too. We often talk about sustainability as having 3 pillars, environmental, social, and economic, or people, planet, and profit. The environmental, social, and economic goals are linked. If you think we have 17 sustainable development goals, and they're incredibly diverse. So when we look at sustainability, don't make it just all about the environment, and particularly don't make it just all about carbon. Tackling social goals will help you to make faster progress on your other goals too. So we've been working with Civilmart on modern slavery. Civilmart wanted to develop a governance framework to comply with Australia's modern slavery legislation. Look out New Zealand, it's coming soon, and embed human rights and ethical business conduct into its procurement framework. They have more than 2,000 suppliers, including some overseas, and Civilmart wanted to positively influence its supply chain and actively work with suppliers on responsible procurement initiatives. So we worked with Civilmart to produce a supplier code of conduct, a supplier questionnaire and evaluation process, and a modern slavery risk assessment. We've also been helping them with policies as well as their latest modern slavery statement that's just come out recently. Similarly but different, Eagle Lighting. We've been working with them on responsible procurement, but they wanted to start at the beginning. Not that they hadn't been acting with sustainability in mind before. Many, dare I say, most businesses do in one way or another, but instead what they wanted to do was make sure their focus was in the right areas. So we started with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and we found 5 of them that spoke to the heart of Eagle Lighting's business. Then we developed a framework for responsible procurement that focused on those 5 Sustainable Development Goals that mattered most. They now have processes for partnering with their suppliers to help them both to improve their impacts together. We also helped them to develop their communications in both fact sheets and website content to help with their sustainability messaging. Now, Emily, we've talked about a lot of things that we do, but in a lot of ways, I feel like we've only just peeked under the lid.
I agree, Nicole. Yeah, there is so much more to discover in what you can do next to build your sustainability story. So you can see this wheel and what it represents on our website, and it shows many of our services, although the list does keep growing. So check back to see if it gets updated. Importantly, though, the magic really in what we do is found in the middle of the circle and with all of those connections. So coming back to our first tip about connecting your work, that's how we think about the different tools and services that we've got. There's overlap across so many areas, and the magic comes from building those connections. So hopefully that gives you some good overview, and now it is time to come to your questions. So as Nicole already mentioned, just a reminder to keep adding those to the Q&A. You can see that there's a couple already. So we might start with Patrick. Thank you for your question. Patrick's asked if the reports that we're doing for companies generally large and complex, and what would this look like for a smaller business? It's a great question. Nicole, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can. Look, it's right that there are so many complexities to the way that you can do reports. And if you're doing the big reports, if you like, if you're doing a GRI report, if you're doing an integrated report, it can be rather large and even, dare I say, a little bit scary, particularly for a smaller business. But there are all sorts of ways that you can report and communicate what you're doing. And while there are these formal frameworks out there, we do work with smaller companies as well. Can I say, to right size the work that we do and the way that you communicate. Sometimes for some companies, a 1 or 2 page fact sheet is what you need. Or maybe it's a 6-page strategy and roadmap document that you need. But it's definitely not one size fits all. And it also depends on just what you need to communicate and really what your stakeholders are expecting to hear. So yeah, if it's not one of the formalized frameworks that you need to follow, then there definitely are a lot of options available.
Yeah, but even following the formalized frameworks, it still doesn't have to be huge. So if you look at, as ThinkStep, we published our first IR report, integrated reporting report, 3 years ago now. And at the time, we probably wouldn't have been much bigger than 20 people. And it's a simple and easy to understand report. Yes, we report against integrated reporting. We're talking about the capitals and what they mean to us and how we reflect them. But that doesn't mean it suddenly has to be solid pages of text and 300 pages. It's a short and fairly simple report that talks about where our priorities are. So absolutely, you can still do that, even following a framework for a much smaller business. Okay, so the next question is in from Bing. And how long is the duration of these projects, for example, to generate a sustainability report? I'm going to raise the old adage of how long's a piece of string. Really does depend. But Nicole, again, I'll hand over to you for first take.
Yeah, so it really does depend. It depends on a million factors. Some things can turn around surprisingly quickly and can develop up within a couple of short months. If you know what you want to communicate, you know who you want to communicate it to, and you've got the data information available to be able to plan out your communication well. What we find is that in our projects, often we will start a project and then there's kind of a bit of a delay while our clients need to go away and really gather the information that they need. Sometimes we have to go and talk to stakeholders. So when you look at something like a materiality assessment, we actually do go and speak to your stakeholders and interview them. So it really depends, but it could be potentially only a couple of months if you understand exactly what you need and you have the information available, or maybe even less if you really have everything. But through to it could be, say, 6 months or something if it's a really extensive process where we need to lead you through a process of gathering that information.
Yeah. And then for other projects, again, it as Nicole said, it varies depending on data. I think that's particularly true where it comes to product work, where we're looking at life cycle assessments, or to carbon work, because a lot of that depends on how quickly you can gather the data and whether you've got the resources to do that. And then as Nicole said, in the strategy space, if you've got anything where you're touching on stakeholders, other things can be much quicker. So a question in from Anna: how long and how much does it cost a small or medium company, and what are the requirements to start this process, and where can I start? That's a great question, but I'm not quite sure if that's regarding a sustainability report or any other project. So it probably depends, again. But best thing to do is to reach out to us at engage@thinkstep-anz.com, and we can point you in the right direction and have a chat about what your needs are, because as we've said, it really depends on the complexity of what you want to do, what you've already got, and what you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, one of the main things when we're working with new clients, and particularly if they're on the small to medium enterprise end of the scale, is really work out what it is that you need and what your priorities are, what your strategy is, and where you need to start. Because I don't want the answer to be, oh, you need hundreds of thousands. No, it's never hundreds of thousands almost, but tens of thousands of dollars worth of major exercise when perhaps that isn't actually what you need. And so we do offer workshops doing things like gap assessments or something like the maturity assessment that we mentioned earlier that Comvita used, where it's a relatively small engagement, short duration and not very expensive, to then be able to really set a foundation to then build from and work out what you can do yourself versus what you need help with. We're very much focused on enabling you to do as much as you can and to be able to upskill your business to keep going. We're not in the business of making work for ourselves year on year, but rather being able to provide you the tools and teach you to be able to do it yourself as well.
Yeah, great point. So Patrick's asked if we've got any good examples of case studies we've done for small businesses. Yeah, we have lots of case studies on our website, and they cover lots a full range of services and also all different sizes of businesses. So it's probably a good place to start and to see what's possible and what's out there. Again, if you're talking about a sustainability report, not to blow our own trumpet, but I would point you at ours, because one of the things we focused on is doing our first report, and then we did an update a year later. It wasn't a full report. And again, we're trying to actually quite literally use that as an example to show what's possible to do to still meet with expectations, but to keep it small and to not overcomplicate it. So I think you should be able to find all of our historical reports on the website as well.
There is a link in the chat to our integrated report that's been put there. Thank you, Matthias, for popping that up for us.
Thank you, Matthias. From Townsend then, so who would be the right people in the business to start a materiality assessment? That is a great question.
Ooh.
And buy-in is so important. And Nicole, I will hand over to you to talk more.
Yeah, so I was doing a materiality assessment which started with the sustainability team in a company, because that's pretty much where it always starts, is with people who are focused on sustainability. But what was really important is they actually needed the buy-in of the CEO to the process. And so while it might start as an initiative of the sustainability team, actually the business needs to buy into it, because what you find through a materiality assessment is that material topics often come up as things like sustainable financial performance. And I've had senior people in companies look at me and go, but that's not a sustainability thing, that's a business thing. It's like, yeah, that's because sustainability is business excellence. And so what you find is that a materiality assessment will point out a heap of integrated material topics to your business that spread across the whole business. So certainly starting with the sustainability team, and by all means, engage at thinkstep-anz.com, and we can have a chat with you about what the process looks like, and help you to communicate with your senior management team, particularly to make sure that there's buy-in to get the best result for your company.
Bing's asked if we have suggestions for individuals looking to build up sustainability concepts and knowledge. Yes, we do. Matthias has actually just shared our need to knows. So that's they're guides that we've put together that, again, they're plain English, they're easy to understand, they're 3 or 4 pages with some nice graphics in there as well, so it's not all text. And it's all about explaining what some of these tools are, and what the concepts are, and where you might look to get started. So, for example, there's some that focus more on LCA, some on circular economy, some on materiality. We're kind of covering that full suite. There's more being developed all the time, but those are a really good place to get started. And then, as Nicole mentioned, it may well be, if you're starting out, the best thing may well be to sort of look at a maturity assessment or a gap assessment and kind of go, well, where are we and where should we focus? And potentially use the SDGs to help you identify what's important.
Yeah, those need to know guides. We published a new one a little while ago, and I emailed a copy of it to a very experienced sustainability manager. And I said to him, look, I just wanted to let you know it was here. Like, I know you don't really need it, but I just thought you'd like to know it was there. And he just went, oh, this is fantastic, because while I don't need it, I need good materials to be able to educate other people within my business. And so even if you know what you're doing, using those need to know guides could be a great tool in your arsenal to help build up work across your business as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Nick, can we point you towards LCAs done for horizontal infrastructure such as pavements, stormwater treatment systems? Good question. I can certainly point you towards environmental product declarations for materials used in horizontal infrastructure. So Downer and Higgins have both produced EPDs for their asphalt in Australia and in New Zealand. There's lots of EPDs out there for pipes, for stormwater, so concrete pipes and plastic pipes. So there's lots of that information out there that helps to build towards it. What you'll generally find when you're looking at an infrastructure project is you tend to then take the EPDs or background information for the products that you're using and then put them together into more of like a green building tool. So something like using the infrastructure sustainability framework for horizontal infrastructure, or potentially using Green Building Council tools for that side of it, for buildings. So I am trying to think if we have a specific example where we have done one for that we can share, and we'll follow up afterwards if we can. But certainly there's stuff out there for the materials.
Thank you very much, Emily. And I'm going to have to be a party pooper and call this to a halt. We really value everyone's time, and we have passed the half hour, and we promised you a half-hour webinar, so we're going to stick to it. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you found it valuable, and please contact us if you've got any other questions or even requests for topics for need to know guides or for future webinars as well. In the meantime, we wish you well on your sustainability journey this year. We really hope that you can take your next steps, and we hope that you can succeed sustainably. Have a great afternoon.
We have many more webinars on our website on a whole host of sustainability topics. Visit us at thinkstep-anz.com.